Hello, my name's Duncan Robertson. I'm one of the freelance gallery educators that helps deliver at the National Gallery of Scotland on the Gallery Socials programme. Today we're going to look at two videos, one talking about an artwork I've chosen, Wittgenstein, New York by Eduardo Paolozzi, and second video will be a short presentation on a collage inspired by the work of Eduardo Paolozzi. So hopefully you can get a cup of tea, and maybe you want to pause to make yourself a cup of tea and have a biscuit. Here I can offer you from my virtual Eduardo Paolozzi shortbread plate there, a cup of tea, and follow this little video. I've chosen this work, Wittgenstein in New York, as is part of Eduardo Paolozzi's work in the early 60s and 70s, very similar to the print you see behind me here. This is a print that Eduardo Paolozzi gave me as a present when I was in Munich. I was an exchange student in the class of Sir Eduardo Paolozzi in Munich. When I was studying at Edinburgh College of Art, I went across to Munich for an exchange programme. And I was very lucky, actually. Eduardo took me under his wing slightly. He took me out swimming. He took me to the opera. He took me out for meals. He was very interested, and I was very young at the time, in what I seemed to think and wanted to do. It was amazing. I've always been kind of a fan since. And I thought if we looked at this print here, Wittgenstein in New York, we talked through Eduardo Paolozzi's process. It's very typical Eduardo Paolozzi. You don't need to look at the signature at the bottom to know it's an Eduardo Paolozzi print. It's his style of collage, taking found materials from magazines and papers, things that people usually throw away, putting them down onto the paper and using them in the image making. It's a silk screen print. It's very typical the way he works. Silk screen print is a process where you put an image onto a screen, very thin mesh, and you mask off the other areas. Then you put the ink down, you pull it across with a squeegee, and the ink falls through the white bits, the holes where the holes are, and makes the image in the bottom. This is a process that was more used with industry. It was more used for advertising, film posters, very famously railway posters that are worth a fortune these days. And it was really thought of an industrial process, not a fine art process. Eduardo Paolozzi was very influential in bringing that process into the fine art world. In this print here, we see his typical bright, joyful colours. And we can tell it's New York from these high rises in the background, reminiscent of the architecture of Manhattan. There's a flag at an obscure angle. It's reminiscent of the Stars and Stripes, but somehow inverted colours. And he's using lots of the symbolism that he likes to use in his works. The title, Wittgenstein in New York, Wittgenstein did famously visit New York. Wittgenstein was an Austrian philosopher, and he was very interested in the ideas of speech and miscommunication and the philosophy of how people live together and how cities work and how cultures work, and that would have interested Eduardo very much. And there's other elements in the work, like these two crash mannequins that are in the center of the figure, or anatomical diagrams. I think he might have got the image for something like from a medical manual like this one. This is one which is describing the digestive system, going down through the digestive system. Eduardo might have cut out an image like this, cut it out, and stuck it onto the image and used it in this print. And he's added compartments for the brain, like there's different areas, and the digestive system's looking a bit like a machine. He was very interested and fascinated by the idea of the man-machine, the robot. In fact, he was very interested in the film Fritz Lang's Metropolis. He really particularly liked Fritz Lang's Metropolis, which is a sort of very early view of what they thought metropolises would be like in the future. The flying plane in the horizon might be symbolic of that. He's also using a spiral in the there in the sky. It's a very strong geometric shape being used by artists very often in artwork. Perhaps he's alluding to hypnotic effects such in films like Vertigo and Psycho, though perhaps he's conversely is looking at ancient cultures like Celtic culture or Mayan culture, which also taken geometric forms in their artwork. Eduardo Paolozzi quite often raises more questions than answers questions in his artwork. He quite often does things that are quite surprising, actually, in his work. For example, if we look down the edge, we have these dots and dashes of colours, and at the bottom right-hand corner, there's little circles of colour. Now, they're registration marks to the printer, and they're usually hidden and away from the image so the viewer doesn't see, but Eduardo has inverted them and actually put them into the print. You see them quite often in things like here, this box here, this is cornflakes box, and it's got these registration marks on it, and this is to help the printer to know when they're running out of colour or a colour's fading during the pool of a colour, to help the printing process, and usually they're hitting, and it's very typical of Eduardo Paolozzi to actually show the ways of making a work. He really likes showing how things are made, the behind the scenes part of art in artworks. So sometimes he does quite surprising things. And he was very adventurous in the types of inks he used. For example, we've got silver and gold ink within this print, Wittgenstein in New York. And these were very new, cutting edge techniques at the time. Pulled through the screen, it gives this very metallic and modern feel. If you see the print behind me here, it still looks very fresh and modern. It's actually over 50 years old, but it still looks quite contemporary, I think. I still think we think of Eduardo Paolozzi being a very contemporary artist. Eduardo Paolozzi actually is from Edinburgh. And he's a very important artist for here in Scotland, I think. He went on to be a big name, an international stage, and his work has now become quite collectible. Well, I hope this short talk has helped you to look and think about Eduardo Paolozzi's work, and hopefully you'll be able to join me again to do a quick example of a collage in the second video. And it just leaves me to say goodbye, and nice to see you again in the gallery, whenever that may be, when we can get back into gallery. We really hope the gallery socials go ahead again. And for the time being, just stay well. Okay, thank you. Bye.